So we are starting on the lecture notes on Puritanism. And you can see it says American literature. That was what the class was called before. However, it is still American literature that we are focusing on in the first semester for sure. And we will be focusing a little bit more on composition during the second semester. So continuing with our introduction to Puritanism, so that we can understand the Salem witch trials. The Salem witch trials were a phenomenon that happened for so many different reasons, and so many different things were influenced afterwards by the Salem witch trials, and pointing out this horrible part of our own history was very important. So individuals used literature to explore it. They used film, they used poetry, they used paintings and illustrations, trying to explain how this thing could happen. How could someone not say, no way, this is wrong, needs to stop? And I want you to, we'll be able to explore that a little bit further. We'll take a little break from doing Puritanism notes because it seems like they become quite overwhelming if we spend too much time on them on any given day. So we will look at some other concepts as we go along. So we're first going to get started with Puritanism basics. Started in the 16th century as a movement to reform the Church of England. Now, we want to remember what it means to have a 16th century, okay? When we look at it in terms of years, okay, when we look at a timeline, we have the year, okay, starting, we have BCE and, okay, and so if we have BCE, before the Common Era, okay, and ADE after the Common Era. Okay, we start essentially at 0. Okay, and when we start at 0, we go up to 100, 200, so on. Now, the interesting thing is when we look at the 16th century, this right here is referred to as, of course, the first century. It's the first 100 years. So even though we're looking at the 16th century does not equal the 1600s, okay? We are going to be off by that. So we're going to have the first century is 0 to 100. So our 16th century, if we continue going on, okay, we're going to actually be looking at it. Okay, this is the 2nd century, and it's prior to, okay, 200s. So this is the 16th century, or it's known as the 1500s. Another important fact is many people want to put an apostrophe here between the 0 and the S. Now, we don't do that unless you're talking about 1500 as a separate thing and then having a possessive form there. This was split into 3 different sects. Okay, sects, thinking about it kind of like sections. We have Presbyterian, Congregational, and Baptist. Excuse me. So they wanted to they wanted to return the church. Okay, they wanted to reform the church. They wanted to bring things backwards. They felt that the church and religion had gone a incorrect route, we'll say, and they wanted to bring it back to what it was originally from. So they wanted separation from the government, and they wanted to bring back to worship in its simplest form. Now, the important thing about this is why the Church of England was formed. We need to think about our King Henry the Eighth. King Henry the Eighth was a despicable scumbag. Okay, he originally was married to Princess Catherine, and she was from Spain. Now, the interesting thing about how he became king is his older brother was married to Princess Catherine first, and they were not together for very long before his brother died. When his brother died, he was going to become king, and he was forced to marry Princess Catherine, as that was said at the time. Now, King Henry, Catherine was considerably older than he was. And during this time, it was very important for kings to have heirs. And an heir could only be male. You were only supposed to pass along the reign of your kingdom to another male heir. Well, Princess Catherine, who became Queen Catherine, did not have any male children with King Henry. Well, King Henry decided to essentially push Catherine to the side when he found a new young lady that he liked. King Henry had many what are referred to as bastards. Okay, yes, I said it, naughty word. Okay, but bastard literally meaning a child being born out of wedlock. He had many of these because he had many affairs. And because of these many affairs, he was not very trustworthy. So he ended up wanting to put Catherine aside. However, he couldn't because they were a Catholic country at the time. And in Catholicism, there was no such thing as divorce. So in order to get what he wanted, what did he do? He formed the Church of England. And then, who did he put in charge of the Church of England? Why, himself. So now he wasn't just the king of the country, he was the king of the religion too. He was a leader of both. So he gave himself ultimate power by turning away from Catholicism. So Puritanisms didn't like this idea. They didn't like what King Henry did. To prove how off King Henry went, is he ended up divorcing Catherine and marrying Anne Boleyn, who he later beheaded on account of treason. She was not able to give him a male heir either. And then he went on to have multiple more wives, many of whom he beheaded for treason. And essentially it was because he may have grown tired of them and found reasons to accuse them of treason. Sad affairs that happened here. And the Puritans did not like what was going on, so they decided that this whole concept needed to get moved away, that this concept of government interfering with the church shouldn't happen. So they didn't approve of the ornateness of the church. Now, ornateness literally meaning, and when you looked at the front altar, okay, you would see instead of some simple cross, it would be a very ornate cross. And it would have gems, rubies and diamonds and emeralds. And the cups would be made out of gold as well. Everything would be over the top with gold and bright colors. Now, Puritans believed everything should go back to something simple. They also didn't believe in the concept of paying of tithes. Now, tithes, okay, this made things difficult. So we're going to use an example here so that you understand the concept of the paying of tithes. And we're going to use Michaela, okay? Miss Michaela, sorry, I'm going to pick on you. So Michaela has a great grandfather, and Michaela loves her great-great-grandfather, and so she doesn't want bad things to happen to him even after he's passed from this world. So this concept of tithes was literally the taking of money and paying it to the church in order for salvation. This meant Michaela's great-great-grandfather, when he died, he would go to purgatory. In purgatory, he would sit until all of his sins had burned away. And then he could go on to heaven. Now, depending on how many sins he had, the longer the time would be that he spent in purgatory. Now, Michaela loves great-great-grandfather, so she doesn't want him to sit in purgatory burning away for centuries. So she takes her money and gives it to the church, and so much money is equal to so many years that great-great-grandfather doesn't have to be in purgatory. Now, the Puritans didn't believe in this concept because Michaela just so happens to be rich, okay? And she has all this money, okay, to use. Now, what about, we'll say, for instance, let's pick on Riley. Now, Riley loves great-great-grandmother, but instead of being rich like Michaela's family, who owns lots of land, and Michaela is a duchess who can pay all this money, Riley's family are farmers, and they don't have very much money. So they can't, even though Riley loves great-great-grandma just as much as Michaela loves great-great-grandfather, they aren't equal. So this concept of the rich being able to buy your way into heaven, okay, that was literally what it turned into. Buy way into heaven. And this is what Puritans did not believe in. So they believed that each person was responsible for his or her own salvation. And they must achieve this through their own abilities. Okay, things that had to be done in order to, okay, such as self-reliance, your own actions, an ability to take care of yourself, and your family. You shouldn't depend on anybody else to try and help you. Next, industriousness. This means working hard. You would work from dawn to dusk. Now, why would it be so hard? One of the reasons it would be so hard is because everything would have to be coming from the earth itself. You would have to be farming. You would have to be making your own food, making your own clothes, and working very hard and fighting through to get these things. We're going to take a pause today and we will go on to the next page. If you have any questions, remember my email is simmyl@gomaroons.org. See you in the next video. Here's my friend today.